We don't have to try any harder. We don't need to fight anymore. We don't have to try any harder, no.
Hey, Jacob.
Hi, Scott.
How are you, my friend?
Well, I wish people could have seen us right before we hit record. I was doing the breathing pattern that you taught us during breath work.
It's a very active one. And I was like getting really quiet and still. Actually, I kind of feel called to do something as Jacob and I were talking before we went live, how I was saying how I forget often before we go live for this podcast to just ground myself, to just take a moment to come into my body and be quiet. And I feel compelled to do a little, very short meditation for listeners to ground themselves into our conversation today as well. How does
I
that
love
feel
that.
for you? Okay. Even
I
though we have
think,
no idea what our conversation is going to be about, let's get grounded.
well, yeah, and I'll just do a disclaimer. If you're skydiving, changing a diaper, driving, wait just for a minute. But
That's a good disclaimer. If you're skydiving and listening to this, please let us know, because that would be fantastic.
We want you as a guest.
Yeah. Let's just take a moment. If you're able to close your eyes, and just allow yourself to, through your natural breath, feel yourself coming into this present moment and feel yourself coming into your body. Recognizing that this is what's happening right now. This is what we have right now. We can be here now. And it might be helpful to imagine, I like to imagine a golden cord that's coming down through the top of my head, all the way down through my body, out through my butt, into the earth, tethering me in the most comfortable, beautiful way to Mother Earth and the energy of Mother Earth, which for me feels like stillness, feels like peace, feels like deep acceptance. And just coming into this moment in our body in a very peaceful, accepting, still way. Knowing that we can bring presence to each moment we choose to bring presence to. And the more intentional we become about doing so, the more naturally present we become in our lives. The more intention we put into grounding, the more naturally grounded we become in our lives. Just a couple more breaths in this grounded state. Then you can open your eyes if they were closed and come back into the space and join me and Jacob for whatever it is we're going to talk about. What are you feeling right now, Jacob?
Well, I'm feeling right now, I'm feeling grateful that you listened to that call and gave us a few minutes of just breathing peace, breathing centeredness. This is the week that I'm putting the last details together with my team and going down to do that big retreat. And so it feels as if, and I've moved over the weekend also. So it feels as if there are just way too many things in my head. And I just love that you followed that tug, Scott, to offer that to us, because just this morning at the end of my team meeting, we usually do it at the beginning, but we raced right into the meeting at the end. I said, hey, let's meditate for 5 minutes. And so we did that for 5 minutes together. And my part of my brain says, oh, this isn't going to be enough.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I find out that even 2 or 3 minutes, or like what you just did with all of us, just a few conscious breaths can really change what's going on in my mind, in my life, whatever. It's really surprising. It doesn't have to be 20 or 30 minutes on a pillow or a silent retreat for 40 days or anything like that.
It can
That sounds pretty good right now, actually.
Yeah. And it's wild because your energy and my energy, they're totally different than went right before we went live. I feel so much more grounded, and you feel so much more grounded to me in this
Well,
moment
good.
too. It doesn't take much.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much. And I think that I was thinking about, I've noticed something that I do. I'm out of touch with a lot of close friends right now. And the more out of touch I become, the more I feel like in order for me to connect, I have to have an hour and a half, or 2 hours to connect with them. And then I have the impulse to call, but I'm like, oh, I only have 20 minutes, or I only have 10 minutes. And so I bypass all these opportunities for connection. And I am playing with just calling up friends and being like, I only have 10 minutes. And I know
Yeah.
I know we need more time to really connect, but those 10 minutes make a difference. And it is connection, and it's real connection. And I look at the ways
Yeah.
in which I make myself believe I have to have more time in order to step
Right.
into what I want to step into, when that's just putting off stepping into it at all. And then you don't end up stepping in.
I do know, and I really love that. And you're talking about investing in connection, Scott, whether that's with other people or with ourselves and source. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the old financial tools, suggestions people would make about if you start saving $1 a week or whatever at age 18, by the time you're so many age, of course, I didn't pay close attention to that when I was 18,
Yeah.
back when it would have just been $1 a week. No, but that sense of like, how will this little bit ever be enough? But it does compound, much like our finances, that there's compound interest. There's an accrual effect. When I do it even a little bit every day, it makes a difference.
Absolutely. As you were speaking, I was thinking of my friend Jenny McDonald in high school, and we had a fund. We called it the Olga's Fund. Do you know what Olga's is? Is that something that's
I don't
everywhere? It's
think
Olga's
so.
Kitchen, and it was like a fast food version of Greek gyros, and they were really, really good. And we loved going to Olga's. So we had a fund that whenever we got anything but an A on anything, we had to put like 50 cents or $1 into this fund. And we were both like all A students and really smart. So it took a lot for the fund to grow. But when there was enough money in the fund, we would go treat ourselves to Olga's. And it is so true. It's like, it feels like so little, and then suddenly you're eating Greek fast food.
By the way, I love that you pronounce gyros that way. Very few people, most of us in America, don't know how to
No, I
pronounce
can't
that.
say gyro. I just can't do it. And I don't even know that gyros is correct, but like
It's
that's
pretty. I think it's pretty correct, honestly.
no.
Yeah, I've studied it deeply, so I know for sure it's
Yeah,
correct.
you're a urologist.
For sure. Yes.
So you have a sold out, congratulations, sold out live in person. I suspect there's still an opportunity for people to come in if they want to do it virtually. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah, sold
Yeah.
out
No.
event. That's amazing.
Thank you. I'm. Well, we talked last week about the abundance practice, Scott, and I just know for sure that practice for me, it began as we talked about. It began as I was beginning to put this retreat together before it was really even a thing at all. And I know, and the reason I'm bringing it up right now is that I know that continued daily return to kind of like what you just did with some breathing and centering, but that return, that centering back into the sense of, I don't want to get in the way of what's possible here because of past experiences, because of my own limited thinking. And I feel like that was part of what has helped this grow beyond what I would have thought possible, was that I knew that I would get in its way if I didn't daily practice staying out of its way.
That is such a beautiful reflection, just that you used the words, I don't want to get in the way, because it I feel invites us all to look at the ways in which we are getting in our own way, the ways in which we are getting in the way of things unfolding naturally. By one, being steeped in our limited beliefs about what we're able to create for ourselves, being steeped in our resistance,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps being steeped in our compulsion to try to force things in a specific way instead of allowing a natural unfolding, because that is another way we get in the way of allowing things to be. And I love that, because for me, it's another reminder that when I take responsibility for my life is when I feel most empowered to create change or to manifest what it is I want to manifest. And so that for me is a reflection of I am taking responsibility here by
Yes.
looking at how I get in the way of things unfolding naturally.
Yes.
And where can
Yes.
we do that in all areas? Jacob, we talk about all these different things, and what I love about them is that for me, they apply to everything. You're speaking about it in the context of the event that you're producing,
Yeah.
but you can apply it to relationships. You can apply it to your relationship with yourself. You can apply it to any sort of aspect of your work life, your creativity, in all areas of our lives. Where are we getting in the way of natural unfolding, of our allowing?
Let's talk about that, Scott. I'm glad you brought more attention to it. So, what are I'm just pulling this thread a bit, but when we think of getting in our own way, I think that's a phrase that is common. Um, and I think I would love to hear you talk about a time, if you can think of a time that you got in your own way. And I'm asking you, but that I'll be thinking about. No, like I think practical examples of this could be really helpful because, like, I think that speaking for myself, I think that I get in my own way more of the time than not.
Yeah,
Truth be told.
yeah, I bet I do too. I bet most of us do. I mean,
Yeah.
what came to mind when you asked the question is I look at it in the context of my work life
Hmm.
and the number of times I have not spoken about what it is I'm offering
Hmm.
out of fear that I'm speaking too much about what it is I'm offering. And so then
Hmm.
I end up not, Jacob, I had the great honor and thrill of being able to guide breath work for members of your Heal Plus Create community yesterday. And
Yeah.
it occurred to me as I'm literally guiding a breathwork session that I never mentioned to the people there who showed up for it that I offer this weekly online. It's things like that. That's me. And that wasn't even intentional. In the
Hmm.
past, that might have been intentional, like, oh no, don't be too salesy or don't market yourself or don't do that stuff. And I have gotten in my way 1,000 times over by being too insecure about my offerings and sharing
Hmm.
them and
Hmm.
then not making any noise for them and then being disappointed that more people aren't showing up for my events,
Sure.
right? So that is for me a very concrete example in my work life.
Yeah, I love this. It's something I struggled with for a really long time also, and sometimes still do. So I would love to hear, if you don't mind, Scott, just pull that a little bit more. Can you talk about what is that insecurity or the feeling of reluctance to talk to me more about that? Because I know part of that is very genuine, not wanting to come off as a salesperson, huckster, manipulative, always just trying to get the next buck or whatever. So I know there's some parts of that, but what else would you say is in there?
I think it's two things. I mean, I think the biggest at the core is a sense of worth, a
Mm,
lack of sense of worth
mm-hmm,
in what I'm offering,
mm,
right? Even though I believe in what I'm offering,
sure,
obviously if there's a part of me that struggles when it comes to putting a price tag on it, it's because there's some sort of conflict between what I'm offering and what I feel the value is, even though I believe in the value of what I'm offering too. So that's part of the story. And another part of the story for me, I believe, is also as much as I put myself out there in a lot of ways, so you wouldn't necessarily think that there's a fear of judgment that is directing my choices. I
sure.
think around this story, there is that fear of judgment. Like, people, how are people going to perceive me if I'm marketing my stuff in a more proactive way? And I'm really getting better with it. I'm moving through it, and I'm coming into. I feel like I'm coming into my power around this more and really
Mm,
looking, because the thing I remind myself, Jacob, is I'm not forcing people to do anything. If they want to come to my workshops, they come. And by
yeah.
sharing what it is I'm offering, and I believe in what I'm offering, and I know it's helping people based on the feedback I'm receiving from people, there really shouldn't be a downside to speaking about it. If you feel like you're offering a beautiful gift to people. Like the
Mhm.
workshop you're offering is a
Mhm.
beautiful gift to people. It's a
Mhm.
gift they have to pay for, yes, but the
Mhm.
offering in it is a great value.
Right.
And why isn't that enough? Like, that's enough. Put that out there, speak to it. However people receive it is how they receive it. And
Yeah.
that's okay. I don't know.
Yeah,
You
you know,
say more
it's
about this.
interesting. Well, no, I love this conversation, Scott, because it's been in such an area of difficulty for me in the past, and then it continues to be an area of growth for me to know how to value and to, when I was in the mortgage business, or some other enterprises, or I have friends who are doctors and lawyers, and and I know you have friends who are professionals in various ways, and those things have a sort of set sense of an agreement upon, hey, there's gonna be money exchanged here, and I don't show up to the lawyer's office and go, oh my God, I just thought out of the goodness of your heart you're going to give me great legal advice, but in the spiritual and self-help personal development world, that can feel murky, and it did for me for so many years. And partly I didn't want my own things that I was doing to always get sort of a sense of being tainted by, oh, this is for the money. So it's something I definitely have had to keep working over time. And early on, Scott, I'm sure maybe you have stories like this too. Early on, when I would even start offering, guidance sessions, I was so, the imposter syndrome was so
Yeah.
strong in me that I would just give them away always. It's just
Yeah.
people. So people would hit me up, and I'd spend an hour and a half with folks. And then when I eventually put a price tag on it, I think the earliest one was like $49 or something like that. I was so afraid, and didn't want to turn people off, or didn't want to come off as not being truly open-hearted and generous with these things that I didn't feel were mine. Like, when I sit with someone, whatever's happening isn't coming just from me and my skill at all. And so it took me a long time to understand, though, that when people do exchange at the level of currency that is available to us at the moment, when they do give you some money, it actually is an exchange. And I found that when I would do it for no fee ever, either people wouldn't value it very much for themselves, like they would just go, "Oh yeah, no, that's just a buddy giving me advice, or or his insights or whatever." When they pay for it, it creates an agreement that says, "I'm going to show up to this session with an intention." And it's not what they get from me; it's what they get from themselves that says, "I'm going to make this important to me."
Yeah.
So that
Absolutely.
helped me over time,
Absolutely.
to start realizing I'm not doing them any favors. Like with this retreat, we've offered many, many partial and full scholarships for the live broadcast section, because we don't want this to be something that only people with tons of disposable income can attend. So we're doing our very best to make it accessible. And so I think there's a balance there.
Absolutely. And I feel like for this and for everything, especially, I guess, if you're working in the healing arts or the creative arts, and it's like finding that balance that feels most true for you.
Yeah,
There are any number of books telling you, or even mentors out there, like, don't give anything away for free, or and others who are give lots away for free up front, and whatever it is. But I think the trick is feeling into what feels good for you when
yeah,
you're connecting with people, when you're relating with people about what you have to offer, what they're, and just
yeah,
in checking in with yourself. Does this feel good? Can I move into this relationship, into this agreement, feeling respected, feeling in my integrity, feeling all of those things? And if yes, and even if that comes to you offering a complete free scholarship to someone,
sure.
that's beautiful. And maybe it will be that you charged full price in the end, and that's what your integrity
Mhm.
nudged you to do.
Mhm.
And again, this applies to everything as well. This applies to everything, checking in with ourselves.
Yes.
How are the choices we're making? How are they making us feel?
Right.
Are we in our integrity as we move forward in our lives and our decisions?
Yes.
You know, and integrity is such a huge thing. I don't know that we've talked about integrity too much on this podcast, but it is it can be really difficult to be completely aligned with your integrity in decision making, in business dealings, because I feel like there are always so many impulses that nudge you away from being wholly, wholly, wholly in your integrity.
Yeah.
It's like shortcuts, or maybe not speaking 100% of what you want to say because you feel like the 95% will be received in a better way than the 100% would be received. And for me, knocking out that 5% is not being wholly aligned in my integrity if I'm
Hmm.
choosing to do it. And it's not the I feel like I don't have concrete examples right now because I feel like you're about to ask me for one. So if you do, chime in. But it's just that, like, I do feel it is possible to be functioning at 95% integrity and to still feel really good about what I'm doing, but I am consistently pushing myself to look at, what is the word? What is this? Is it integrous? Is this an integrous action? Is that the right way to say it? Does
No,
it,
I don't think that. I don't think
like,
that
how would
one's.
you say that instead of
Well,
always
is
having to
this?
say living in my integrity? And
I don't know a better
it's not
word.
integral.
No,
I don't know. Anyway,
those are related, of course.
I'm going to say integrous, even if that's not a word. You know, it's like I think there's great value in regularly considering, is this integrous? Okay, forget
Uh,
it.
well, look. What's interesting to me too, Scott, with that part, and I don't want to stray too far from the core, kind of where you were going with all that, which is communicating value, but with every action word, and that's going to sound very perfectionistic. I just mean with the direction being, the growth being, that my actions and words are much more aligned with who I really am, with what matters to me. And it's interesting that as we communicate our value, whatever that might be, and it doesn't have to be just a monetary value, we're also communicating our values.
Yeah,
Our values are those core principles, things, ideas by which we run our lives. And it's interesting to me that I've discovered that anytime things are not working well in my life, most of the time it's because I'm out of line with one of my values, one of my most important values. So, for example, when I do values exercises, discovery for myself, freedom is always right up there at near the top.
hmm,
Um, Now, freedom to me comes with so much responsibility. So it's not just reckless, like, hey, I'm going to be me. I'm going to do what I want.
right.
It's am I living in the truth of freedom, which requires a lot of strength and it requires some impeccability with word and with all that. But I've found, for example, that whenever I would, almost every time I would notice that something really doesn't feel good in my life, this job I'm working, this relationship, whatever it might be, that just does not feel good. If I pull back the layers a couple of layers deep, it's almost always pretty obvious that I'm out of alignment. I'm out of integrity with something that matters very much to me. And then that can become then an inquiry that says, does this new circumstance, or the circumstance that feels so weird, does this mean that I need to change that dynamic? Or is it a case of actually needing my values to evolve to fit this time of my life?
Mm,
Because when I was, a parent of several teens at home and driving people every which way and all that, like, my sense of personal space and freedom was violated constantly because my life was just under a lot of more obligation, legitimate obligation. And so it wasn't time for me to exercise my freedom, in saying I'm not doing any of this stuff anymore because I'm tired of it. It was like, no, I actually need to accept the fact this is the phase of life I'm in. But also, that then informed some conversations I began having with my children as they were evolving. It's like, hey, it is time for me to turn some of these things over to you. So I guess my point is, what you were just talking about, it does provide a lens to be able to go, what's going on here? And does this just mean I need to update the agreements I have around something? Does it mean that one of my values is actually being violated and I need to pay attention to that? And that's, in my life, that's pretty frequently been the case. I really was shy about enforcing in my own living the values that matter to me.
yeah, and even even as you're speaking about the value of freedom and essentially letting that go when you were parenting younger children, even then, I feel like there is an opportunity, if you really feel like freedom is a value,
Hmm.
to look at, well, how can I, within the context of my life right now, which isn't very free,
Exactly.
still make
Exactly.
space for some freedom,
Within the
right?
constraints of this situation.
Exactly,
Yes, I love
exactly.
that.
I
And
think
I
we can
love that
always lean
creative
into that.
question you just asked. How can I? To me,
Yeah,
that's such a creative question. Just like, what if? What if
yeah,
this were possible? How can I, inside the constraints of this, how can I still experience the benefit of this value for me inside of this? And there's no, like, that's one of the beauties of constraint at times, is that actually does provide a framework for more discipline and more,
absolutely.
um, just because the obvious face of something doesn't provide for, let's say, freedom or lots of free time or whatever, it's like, okay, but inside the constraints here, it's Viktor Frankl.
Yes,
Whatever circumstance, I still have a choice.
yeah. And how can I is an invitation for a yes.
Yeah.
How can I assumes there's a way to do it versus like, can I, which invites a no. Like, don't even invite the no.
Yeah.
If look at what it is you want to create in your life, and don't allow your mind to tell you you are unable to do it. A lot of people, I've worked with a lot of people over the years who believe absolutely that their toxic work environment, that nothing can be done about it, or
Hmm.
their toxic employee coworker, as they see it, that there's no possibility to create any change in the dynamic.
Hmm.
So they go to, can I do anything about this? It's always a no, instead of, how can I create a more peaceful work environment, or how can I create a better relationship with my partner or coworker? And that automatically gets you in the energy of yes, in the energy of creation, in the energy of imagination.
Yes.
And that's where ideas are born.
Yes. That's where original solutions to a situation happen. When we
Yes.
just roll in with, like, the puzzle piece has to fit this one way, but saying how can I means, oh, I'm stepping back long enough and loosening the tension on this to
Yeah.
say, oh, what if I turn the puzzle piece some more? I wonder if it'll fit. How can I wonder if it'll fit this way?
Yeah. This is for me this is the play that can be a part of the spiritual path, the spiritual journey, this human
Yes.
experience, is getting curious, getting
Yeah.
interested, asking the questions that lead you into your imagination and creativity,
Yeah.
and see what happens. Because why not? Like, why not make it more of a game, more of an exploration? Because we're going to be faced with all the challenges anyway. We're going to, you know what I mean? We're going to be triggered anyway.
Right.
We're going to have whatever we're having happen anyway. So why not, as much as possible, bring to it a sense of fun, a sense of
Right.
play?
I
And
know. I love that. And honestly, I was trying to think of an Osho or one of the other quotations that I was bring your words were bringing this up. It's like, creativity is your spirit at play. Like, you're playing with whatever's in front of you, whether that happens to be an easel with paints or a situation. And that helps me a lot, Scott, to just keep coming back to the sense of, I shared with you and everyone several weeks ago, I went and had that psilocybin journey, among some other plant medicines, but that was a big one. And one of the experiences, in that, was this tremendous gratitude to be returning back into the limitations of my body and the laws of gravity, and just what we'd call very ordinary life. It was like, oh my God, I get to not be completely unbounded. I get to go back into that experience with its tangles, with its challenges, with all the things. And my God, I love the puzzle of being me in this world. And so those experiences for me are such a great reminder that, man, whatever happens after this life is likely to have a lot fewer limitations or whatever.
Mhm.
I get to go back and be in that body and be in that personality and with my history and with the challenges I've had and the things that I still want to create and overcome. I get to go back and do that. And it's only for this long.
Yeah.
So I love being reminded of that. Like, keep playing with this thing.
Keep playing. I mean, I feel like that's what you're doing with the abundance book. that
Yeah.
we talked about last week and that you introduced me to, and that now that's what I'm doing. And I'm bringing to this experience around abundance and scarcity and looking at the stories, this like beautiful sense of curiosity and play,
Yeah.
with a really clear sense that I am already benefiting from the journey. And I'm also seeing some tangible benefits in my life in
Yeah.
terms of abundance and some of like financial abundance happening around this.
Yeah.
But as important, or even more important, is the journey, and looking at, okay, this is something I'm giving energy to now, and there is a part of my mind that is telling me this is wholly unimportant in a world with so much violence and trauma and sadness, and to give any focus, time, and energy to more financial abundance is silly. That's a part of my mind story that I'm hearing, and I'm just not that interested in anymore.
Yeah.
Like to that part of my mind, I say, this is not an either or situation at all.
I love
I,
that.
I am expansive enough to hold space for the work that I know I need to do around my story with abundance,
Yeah.
as well as hold space for many other things in my life. And knowing that by holding space and giving my energy to a practice that is serving my joy is actually not only contributing to my life in a positive way, it is contributing to the world in a positive way. I believe this because that is what the energy of joy does.
Yes.
And so please, for those of you listening, if there's any part of your mind that wants to shame you for giving yourself over to moments of joy, let that go, and
Hmm.
trust that you immersing yourself in joy is actually serving our planet in a powerful way. We need more of that energy. And that your misery does not call anyone else out of their misery.
That's
That's not
right.
how it works.
That's right.
If that's how it worked, we wouldn't be nearly as miserable a world, because there are many miserable people,
Right.
and we're in. And I don't say that from a judgmental place. I say that from a, like, the reality of this world right now is that the energy of misery and rage and disconnection is very big.
Mm.
It's very
Sure is.
big, and we don't tug ourselves away from that by centering ourselves more in it.
Yeah.
You know?
I wanted to take a minute and just let that sink in because I think it's important, Scott. It's important because to me, in 2008, 9, 10, I really was living in situation of scarcity, but also feeling so much freedom during that time from the constraints, from the pressures of having all this ambition, of chasing money, of trying to grab it somehow. And so it felt really good to let that go for some years and really be kind of a renunciate and let things go and really. And I remember the guides asked me at a certain point, what do you really want? What a clarifying question. So hard to answer frequently.
Yeah.
But at one point they asked me, what do you really want? Do you want to just be one of those who lives the life of being a renunciate and stays out of society and stays out of the money system and just really kind of disappears, but you're holding space, in this world, and there's energy in that. That's a good thing. And there are people who are really called to that. And that can be attractive to part of me to just be a hermit. And they said, but what do you really want for the rest of your life? Like, what would really turn you on? And they said, don't answer right away. And I went away for a few days. And when I returned, um, I, s- I said, I've really tuned in and I can feel myself really wanting to re-engage, to create things, to be engaged with people on the ground level, and in the actual earth experience, and not just from a distance. And they were like, look, either path is valid. Either choice would have been valid for you. Since this is what you've chosen and you know that to be true, then you just need to know that um, every step's going to be guided, and there are going to be times as you go back in, you've kind of been living in this state of grace, really zen, kind of not being engaged and all that. As you go back in, know that there will be times that you are afraid that you've lost your way, that you've lost your connection to source, that you're somehow off track. There'll be times when you feel confused and whether or not you can pay your bills and all those things. Just know that as you go back in, every step is guided and you're provided for and you're protected. And that has been my experience, Scott. And so that connection, and I brought it up partly because the sense of almost holiness in being a renunciate and outside of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're in a time right now during which a lot of teachers who have been doing their work for, a decade or more, I feel like there's a newer group of teachers who are coming on the scene right now, and they're not yet worldwide renowned names, but they're coming forward, and they're coming forward with what we're talking about today, you and I, a sense of tremendous humility, a sense of what we offer wants to be empowering to people, not empowering to us at the expense of these people. Like, no, the magic is in you, the wisdom is in you. The work that I do wants to be a mirror to help you remember to see yourself again. And it also, to me, the hallmarks of the people who are coming forward right now is humility, a sense of empowerment, and also becoming models of an economy that can actually work for everyone. Um, being models of really healthy financial situations and business models, but have it be in a way that is not borrowing from the old templates that really are manipulative and really are disempowering to people.
What's an example of that for you? If one comes to mind, like, what does that look like?
It's interesting. There's this guy in Seattle who has a business that unfortunately it just came out that he's in trouble, a bunch of scandals, but on the business side, he said, I'm not going to take these wild profits every year while everyone else is struggling to barely make ends meet, and I'm going to pay everyone at minimum wage. My company is 70,000. Everybody's going to be able to get paid well. I hate to have to use that example because I know that he's taking a lot of shots right now, but I feel like his motive in that and the fact that it has played out in the business is a really cool example, and I think we need more and more of that.
Sure.
And that's what I have determined to do with the Institute for Creative Living and with Heal Plus Create is we are going to come into this, and the places where we feel resistance or like we're breaking the rules, in favor of abundance, in favor of generosity, in favor of honoring the value of those who work with us and all of that. It reminds me of being a parent, Scott, when my kids were, babies, and I had been raised very harshly, very heavy-handed discipline. And it was drilled into me from infancy. This is how you're supposed to raise your children. And
Right.
I could feel it. I was still part of that church when my kids were born, and I could feel it with Nathan. I started disciplining him early on, and it's like in the way that I've been taught, and I could feel how wrong it was. And I said, okay, I know that I'm fucking this up. I know that I'm breaking all the right parenting rules, air quotes. But this does not feel right to me. And so I'm going to experiment with this, experiment with not doing these things, spanking and all this harsh stuff. And, I took some criticism along the way, some of it from my own family at first, because they're like, you're not disciplining your kids and they're going to turn out to be monsters and all this stuff. What's fascinating is I'm bringing that up because of the sense of illegitimacy, the sense of fear I had of experimenting with a parenting model that felt so much better to my body and to my soul. It's like I just cannot be hitting these kids. I don't care what the Bible says or whatever.
Right.
And so watching them turn into really good human beings and smart and resourceful and cool people without being beaten all of those years. Wow, it's astonishing. And looking back, it's like, well, of course, what the fuck was I thinking? But those mental patterns had a lot to say. And I think they do also financially. I think those of us who are really seeking to plow new ground and create businesses and models that can really, really be nourishing for the people who purchase from us, who are clients, for the people who work with us, and for ourselves. It does not have, and I love you keep coming back to that today. It's not a yes or no. It's not binary. It's very Taoist of you. Like the Taoists are always looking for the middle path. Like there's it's never the extreme, right or left, black or white. It's like, no, there's always a choice. That's a third choice. The sucker's choice is it's yes or no.
Right.
So I've been
Yeah.
talking for a while, very quickly.
No, it's great. I love what you were saying about how you were brought up to raise your kids in a specific way,
Yeah.
and you were honoring the fact that that was not feeling okay for you. It wasn't
Yeah.
feeling in alignment, and you made a different choice. And for me, that is such a difficult thing to do as a human being, because that kind of conditioning
Yeah.
is so strong. And that's been another part of this journey that I think is so important. And we've talked about it periodically here and there, but really, really looking at the choices you're making and how they're making you feel, and seeing what is conditioned and what feels true. And when you start to pay attention more and more to the choices that don't feel in alignment with who you are, there's like a 9 out of 10 chance that that has been conditioned in you by those who've raised you, by society, by your church, by whomever. And that part of this path to a more free existence in your humanity is being willing to say, I will no longer be bound to this conditioning if it feels out of alignment with what is true for me. And not only being brave enough to bring awareness to what is conditioned within you, but to actually take action and make different choices.
Mm,
Make choices that step outside of your conditioning. And of course, you're going to get pushback,
right.
because we live in a world that is wildly conditioned. And if you're in a community like you were, a religious community, where the expectations around how you're supposed to show up are so rigid,
Yeah.
and everybody knows when you're not showing up that way, and everyone's going to have an opinion about it,
Sure.
just for you to make that choice within that context takes even that much more courage, right? And yet I know you would say an absolute yes to this, as would I, and as with those of you listening, I suspect, who've made a similar choice, that the benefits so greatly outweigh
Hmm.
the judgment and the arguments that come from it. Like, being in your truth and making choices from that place is always going, in my experience, it has always been more beneficial than the pain of the rejection or the judgment of others, because I stepped outside of that box.
Yeah. Oh my God. This is I wanted to rewind what you said just a moment ago. You drop a lot of profundities, Scott, along the way.
Oh, shucks.
No, you do, but you do it so since with such a velvet sort of sense that sometimes I think that it's I know we're being funny, but I'm also not being funny. You said something I felt like was really important, because when I heard it, it's like, hang on, and then you kept going. I'm like, wait a minute, we need to come back to this, because you really did drop a tool. Um, where you said, when you're looking at the choices you're making and it doesn't feel, I hope you can remember what you said there, because that to me is such a clear, like, put that in your pocket and pull it out all day long, as we're working to retune to the inner sense of guidance, to intuition, to just our basic senses, because we are conditioned away from believing in
Yes.
our intuition and acting on our senses. We're conditioned away from it constantly. And so go back to that for just a minute if you can. I know it was a ways
Well,
back.
I mean, I think it was just that when if you're making choices that feel out of alignment with your truth, like 9 out of 10 times,
Hmm.
those choices are coming from a conditioned response.
Yeah.
They're coming from some part of you that believes you have to do this in order to be accepted, in order to be loved, in order to fit in order
Yeah.
to not be judged. And all of those fears tend to be rooted, more often than not, in conditioning.
Yeah.
We are conditioned within an inch of our lives in so many areas, in all of the areas. How we're supposed to show up in relationships, how we're supposed to hold down a job, how we're supposed to communicate, what we're supposed to do religiously, who we're supposed to love,
Right.
what our art is supposed to look like, what creativity is supposed to look like, how we're supposed to write a book. You know
Right.
what I mean? All of these things, it's like there are all these rule books, And if
Mhm.
you're living in your authenticity, there is zero chance that you will align with all of that conditioning. It's just not possible.
Zero chance. I like that. Yeah.
There is zero chance. You can't.
Yeah.
Some of it you might align with, because you know what the truth is. Some of the societal norms might feel in alignment with who you are too, and
Sure.
that's fine. And if that's the
Look,
case, move forward.
yeah, and I love, whatever the word success means, I love refining that. I love redefining it. Because as you just said, whether it's success, financially or as a parent or lover or any of these things, um, there is zero chance that that is going to look exactly like, whatever the set rule book is,
Yeah,
across the board. If you're really finding out, and that's why I say, Scott, creativity to me is the process by which something real, original, and valuable is formed. And I love to share with people, what if the most creative project you will ever undertake is becoming who you really are, is becoming yourself.
yeah. It's certainly the most valuable act that you're going to undertake in your life,
Right.
right? Isn't this what we're seeking? Aren't we seeking freedom? I know I am. I know you
Yep.
are. And I believe that, and maybe that's not the word many would use for it, but I believe ultimately that is what we're seeking, the freedom
Yeah.
to be who we really are in this
To-
experience, to allow it.
Yeah. And when I go through the process and continue the process and commit to the process of self-discovery, who am I? Who am I in this situation? And then to begin to notice those places where who I thought I was actually an amalgam, a paper mache mask made up of survival strategies and coping mechanisms and fear of rejection and all these things. And that's not to um, be harsh about that. That, I think, every one of us coming into awareness and then coming into adulthood and then eventually coming into the realization, I want more for my life, we'll eventually look at the formed personality, who we created to survive in this world, to cope, is made up of things that aren't authentic to us, and the process of deconstructing that can be really challenging. And that's why that's part of what we're doing on this show every time, Scott, is talking about how to return, how to remember our way home, how to return to who we really are.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I just had the image of the scene from Good Will Hunting with Robin Williams and Matt Damon, when Robin Williams just keeps repeating to Matt Damon, "It's not your fault," or "It wasn't your fault," whichever. It's not your fault. And as you were saying that, that's what I was hearing, because the truth is, you living into your conditioning, it's not your fault. It's
Right.
the air you were breathing from the time you were 1 years old, 2 years old, 3 years old. And yet it is your responsibility now to create a different life for yourself, if that's what you're going to choose to do. It is your responsibility to bring awareness to your conditioned responses and choose differently if they don't feel good.
Right.
It is your responsibility to decide, I want to be a free human being and live in alignment with my heart and with my soul, with love and with peace. These are all our responsibilities, no matter how we were raised, no matter how we were conditioned to be, no matter what kinds of traumas we have endured.
Right.
Ultimately, we're responsible for our lives as they are right now. And that can feel really overwhelming,
Yes.
and it can also feel wildly empowering to
Hmm.
understand that when I step into my responsibility for my life, I am empowered automatically to create change, because I am not giving that responsibility of my life to anyone else. I am not saying that anyone else has control over my happiness, has control over my work, has control over my relationships. Like, I am empowered,
Right.
right? And that's liberating.
It's liberating. It reminds me of the Matrix, when he took the red pill and then, began to really see existence, for what it was. And he's like, I wish I could untake the red pill. Like, what the fuck? I'm
Mhm.
now I now I see. And I think that most of us, as we begin the process or are deep in the middle of the process of deconstructing of that beautiful archaeology mission task of uncovering who we really are under the layers, I love to remind myself and to remind anyone who's struggling with it, please be gentle with yourself for the very reason you just said, Scott. Like these things, many of them can be handed down in DNA, family patterns. I know, for example, my family had some patterns, especially on my father's side, of tremendous poverty. And, that was not just a lack of the ability to manage money well. It was also, it was just also having ideas that didn't fit into the structure of capitalist system so they could make a bunch of money. There's all these different things, but as that's one example of a family trait that was passed down over generation, and some others that have nothing to do with money. That my siblings and I, we look at each other frequently now, and we look at each other and we're saying we're breaking those chains, one link at a time. And I see you over there doing it, brother, in your way, and sister, I see you doing it in your way, and each one of us is working to let go of these patterns that really do not serve us. They're not what we'd love in our lives. They're not the life of joy that we wish to have. And I love having such close mirrors in my siblings for that, because we are working it together, and we're aware now. We're more and more aware of that. We're working it together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I really appreciate your willingness to acknowledge it with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I believe so deeply. I'm believing more and more deeply all the time in the importance of acknowledgement,
Yeah.
because I think that we tend to take for granted so much of our growth and so much of how we're showing up in our lives, instead of really
Yeah.
centering ourselves in the acknowledgement of, this is a big fucking deal.
It's a
Do you
big
know what I mean? Like, I am
right.
a wholly different person than I used to be. And it's
Yeah.
because I have put energy, intention, and practice into becoming it. And this is a big fucking deal.
Right.
And by acknowledging and by resting in that acknowledgement and gratitude for where we've come, I feel, because everything is energy as I see it, it's like that automatically energizes more of the same.
Right.
This is just one other way to energize more of what you're seeking in your life, is by acknowledging when you actually are showing up for yourself in a beautiful way.
Truly.
Yeah.
Truly. My God. Well, brother, I should probably wrap for today,
Yeah. Sure.
just because I do have many bees buzzing inside my head. But what a really cool respite today. It was going to be one of those where we either did it today or it wasn't going to happen at all until a
Yeah.
week or two from now. So I'm so glad that I resisted the temptation to go, Scott, I'm just so busy, because I
Yeah.
really needed this with you today. Thank you. And thanks for doing the early centering, grounding meditation. That was perfect.
Absolutely, man. And I'm excited. The next time we'll talk, it'll be after the big event. So,
Yeah.
why don't you, before we close out, just let people know there's still an opportunity, and this is a really beautiful event with three women who have profoundly impacted my life, and you who've profoundly impacted my life. So, how can people sign up for it, and what is it? One more time.
Well, it's the Heal Plus Create Writers Retreat. It's happening this coming weekend, the weekend before Thanksgiving, before Halloween. So the 29th and the 30th. And as Scott said, it does have Julia Cameron, Anne Lamott, Sark, Lawrence Apala, me, a number of Linda Johnson, a number of people who are going to be teaching there. And there are still virtual seats available for the live broadcast. Anybody who registers for live broadcast will also get access to the full replays for a year afterwards. So you can continue to go back and experience these sessions as often as you want for at least a year. You can find all that at healcreatewrite.com, and then that'll be in the show notes.
Beautiful. Also, and I've just announced a new workshop called How to Love Yourself When Your Mind is Determined Not to.
Ooh,
So it's a self-love workshop. It's on Sunday, November 13th. And you can find a link with details to that in the show notes. And then
oh,
I have
good.
an online breath work this Wednesday as well, and
Okay.
once a week.
And I need to say, last week we had a session with Scott with just my family in my brother's living room, and we were all lying around on blankets doing the breathing, and Scott was sitting in exactly where he's sitting right now, that holy radiance coming down over your head. What a powerful experience. Oh my God. And that time I got to truly do the whole thing, Scott. What we did yesterday for the breathwork session. I was a little bit less engaged because I had to kind of watch the screen and stuff. But oh my God, Scott talks about this. He offers it. If you haven't experienced it, please attend one of Scott's breathwork sessions. It is
Thank you, brother.
fucking powerful and gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a mind blower, I find. Yeah, thank you, man. And I love you. And then those of you listening, here's a call to action. I'm going to get
Ooh.
better about being clear with call to action.
Mm.
As you as this ends, go to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating. That will take you literally 2 seconds. You just click on the number of stars. Hopefully it's 5.
Yeah.
And if you want to add another 30 seconds to 1 minute, leave a review as well. Just a sentence or two about how you're experiencing this podcast and what it's doing for you. And it really helps us to spread the word. So
Yes.
please go do that now. And thank
We
you so
don't
much
have
for
to
listening.
try any harder. We don't need to fight anymore. We don't have to try.